Welcome and thank you for standing by. All participants will be in a listen-only mode for today's conference. During the presentation, to submit questions, please click on your Q&A tab at the top of your screen. After the presentation, we will conduct audio question and answer session. To ask a question at that point, please press star 1. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to Ms. Cindy Biggs. Ma'am, you may begin.
Welcome. I'm Cindy Biggs, and I'd like to welcome you today on behalf of the U.S. Commercial Service, the Export Assistance Center in Chicago, and Thomas Industrial Network. The U.S. Export Assistance Center, or USIAC as we like to say in the government, is one of over 100 domestic offices that form part of a vast global network covering almost 80 countries around the world. Our commercial service trade specialists throughout the United States work with trade specialists in U.S. embassies and consulates in foreign markets. And we've been told too many times to count that working with the commercial service has saved companies months and sometimes years worth of work. So if you're not yet working with us, we'd like to help you save some time and money. We're fortunate to have about 10 USIACs, it looks like, or so calling in today. So welcome to my colleagues. This is the second in a series of webinars that are designed to help U.S. industrial businesses and service companies go global via the Internet and increase exports. Before we start, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping notes. If you've not yet done so, please log onto the video portion of today's webinar by clicking on the link in one of the confirmation My Meetings email you received. If you didn't get it, quickly send an email to molly.burns@trade.gov and she'll provide you with the link. Since Mac users can't install Microsoft Live Meet, join us via the audio portion only. If any of you are having any technical difficulties at any time during the webinar, press *0 and you'll be connected to a net conferencing specialist. Please remember to send in your questions by going to the Q&A box at the top of the screen. Just type it in, and we'll try to address as many of those as possible, prioritizing those that are relevant to the broad audience with us today. If you have specific concerns, we'll provide you with our contact information at the end of the webinar. And now, we are very pleased to be able to tap into the vast professional expertise of Joe Lardieri. Joe's the Vice President of Thomas Industrial Network, who is with us today live from New York. Joe?
Thank you, Cynthia. And unfortunately, I do not have a top 10 list to go with the live from New York. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending today. We really appreciate your time. We know you're busy, but we think we have a session here today that will be very informative, very helpful, and really driving your business and expanding it. And we'll give some examples specifically about how to do that and folks who have done it. Thomas Industrial Network, who some folks may know in some of our previous incarnations, Thomas Register, Thomas Regional, and so forth. We like to think of ourselves as the 110-year-old Internet company, okay? Throughout that entire century-plus of service, the one thing that has not changed, regardless of how people have changed the medium they use to get information, is our core mission, which is to connect buyers of your products with industrial manufacturers. Now, whether that be a distributor, whether you be a maintenance repair operation, or whether you be an OEM, in each case it's the same. How can we help, as we are helping thousands, literally thousands of companies today, expand their business both within North America and globally by leveraging the Internet? We'll talk about some of those methods today, some of the strategies for it, but before we do that, as we all know, going overseas is not simply a matter of getting your product to that dock. It's a matter of what happens to get it off the dock. How do you penetrate those markets? How do you build those networks and those connections and navigate those legal and regulatory waters? And there's no one better positioned to help you talk about that than Cindy Biggs. So, Cindy?
If I could, I'd like to share just a bit of backstory here regarding this webinar. Several years ago, a member of our District Export Council, TechPAC, brought ThomasNet's website capabilities to the attention of our office director, Julie Carducci. And Julie picked up on the strong synergies that exist between the commercial service and ThomasNet, which they obviously saw as well. We share a common goal, and that is to enhance the competitiveness of U.S. firms. A bit later, you'll hear how this relationship has impacted TechPack sales. But before we get to that, for the next 45 minutes or so, we'll discuss a bit about why exporting matters and some of the perceived hurdles, what they are. Joe is going to look at the basics of online industrial trade and walk you through creating the most successful web strategy, which will allow you to more effectively tap into sales opportunities both here and abroad. We'll close with a couple of examples of two small firms that have successfully used both ThomasNet and the commercial service to dramatically increase their sales. But first, as the only U.S. government agency that's dedicated exclusively to export promotions, exports matter to the U.S. Commercial Service because we know that exports equal jobs, and job creation is what we do. One of the manufacturers I work with quite a bit had to increase his workforce 24% last year alone because he began exporting his machines to several foreign markets. But why should your company care about exporting? To me, that's pretty simple. If you're not exporting, you're missing out on 95% of the world's population that resides outside our borders. So by tapping into a much larger marketplace, you increase your probability of selling more. Industrial businesses that export can weather domestic downturns far better than those who don't. And obviously, the more countries you export to, the more effective that strategy becomes. Now, if you've been exporting to Europe or Japan, for example, you might be a little bit concerned about market changes that are taking place there. You could consider adding some emerging markets into that mix. For example, economists predict that 60% of economic growth in the next 5 years will take place in Brazil, Russia, India, and China, the so-called BRIC nations. And the U.S. Commercial Service has a large team of trade specialists in more than one city in each of those markets. There's a first-to-market advantage in many countries and industries, and you don't want your competitors to get there first. Despite the United States' low export numbers in comparison to other exporting nations, more of you are starting to export. In 2010, the $1.83 trillion export of U.S. manufactured goods and services represented the second highest annual total on record. It grew a whopping 17% over 2009. Exports as part of our gross domestic product grew from 11.2% in 2009 to our current level of 12.5%. But we still lag behind India, China, Canada, Germany. Germany represents 40%. So we're here to provide you with a customized solution to change that equation. So if exports are growing, why aren't more of you exporting? These are some of the challenges that companies say prevent them from exporting, which might explain our low export numbers in comparison to other countries. In fact, of the nearly 30 million businesses in the U.S. today, only 280,000 of them export. And those who do export, 58% export to just one market. Not surprisingly, it's Canada. So imagine how many U.S. jobs we could create if those companies alone began exporting to our other NAFTA partner, Mexico. You might be surprised to learn, as I was, that 97% of U.S. exporters are like many of you on the call today. They are SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises, with 500 employees or less. The U.S. Commercial Service has been helping SMEs to export for over 30 years with customized solutions to address each one of these challenges. And I want to be sure to leave plenty of time for Joe. I won't go into too much detail here on what those products and services are, but suffice to say, export-ready U.S. manufacturers and service providers, a host of services which your local commercial service office, the U.S. Export Assistance Center, or USIAC, can walk you through. Everything from free market counseling, market identification, matchmaking services to help you find the right joint venture partner, agent, or distributor, due diligence on potential partners, advocacy. We provide you with the tools and contacts to enter a foreign market and then be successful there by plugging you into a global team of experts both here in the U.S. and in 80 U.S. embassies and consulates abroad. We're mandated to cost recover on some of our services. Many are free. Some start as low as $700 and come with a money-back guarantee. And yes, a U.S. government employee just said that. So to find your local U.S. Export Assistance Center, just go to our portal, which is www.export.gov, and type in your zip code. If you're concerned about protecting your intellectual property rights abroad, the Department of Commerce and the American Bar Association is offering U.S. FMEs a free 1-hour consultation with a volunteer attorney who can discuss intellectual property rights issues as well as speak to specific countries you may be interested in. In our follow-on email, look for a link to request a free consultation. And with that, I will turn the screen back to the guy you really want to hear from, Joe.
Thanks. I don't know what an offer of a money-back guarantee, Cindy. I don't know if I have quite combated that. But perhaps we could talk about how we can make a little money. You know, when we think about industrial buying and selling online, first and foremost, the thing to remember is the online buying process is not significantly different than the offline buying process. What changes is merely two factors. One is how folks get information, and secondly, how an electronic medium, your website, replaces what would normally be done by a human, either a salesperson, a marketing person, or what have you. You know, if you think about the steps of the sale, a customer identifies a need, they look for potential products, they look for suppliers, they vet through those suppliers, they develop a short list, they go through negotiations on pricing and T's and C's and the like, and ultimately make a purchase. Now, all of that can be conducted online, and some products and services lend themselves more easily to it than others. But one piece, in 9 out of 10 instances today, invariably occurs online. And what that is the initial search for solutions and products for what they need. If you think about that, from what we've discovered, from what our research indicates, half of prospects have eliminated a supplier based on what they haven't seen online. Now, the important thing to remember about that is, what are they looking for? Think about it. When a prospect goes online and they're looking at your website, they're expecting the same degree of detailed information, product information, attributes, what you do, what's your value equation, and so forth, as if they were dealing with a member of your staff. If that deep content, if that rich content isn't online, then your biggest competitor now becomes the back button. Because when they go to a search, whether it be on a search engine such as Google or Bing, whether a specialized site like Thomasnet, regardless of which it may be, ultimately they're supplied with a list of both that includes both you, hopefully, and your competitors. So the barrier of entry and the barrier of exit are essentially non-existent. Their ability to go and look for somebody else, it's not like you have them on the phone and you can use your salesmanship or the value you deliver and things like that. That website is the first representative of your company that these new prospects ever do business with. The important thing is you want to make sure that's not the last one that they do business with. So, what are folks looking for? Majority of searchers out there in the industrial world are using what are called long-tail search terms. They're using 3, 4-word terms. They're very specific. They know what they want. Okay? Even if you're selling a service such as injection molding, okay, they may very well still use a long-tail search term. It's not just as if you're looking for, deep groove radial bearings. It's not necessarily just a product, even on the custom side itself. So if you're thinking that the best approach is, I want to give general information, sort of tease them a little bit, get them to reach out to me, the reality of it is in very, very few instances will that be a successful strategy for you. Okay? So the other aspect is that's absolutely crucial. While it may in very many ways be a Google world here in the United States, outside of the United States that's far from the case. In China, a search engine called Baidu is the Google of China, if you will. Okay? In India, it might be Guraji. If you're selling it to the Middle East, it's probably Arabic. And in other parts of the world, I'm sure there's other entities as well. So in thinking how you need to position your content, it's absolutely crucial that you bear that in mind. What may work with U.S. search engines may not necessarily work overseas. So it's important that the content is there because ultimately every search engine is about delivering the best and the most relevant results to a searcher. And the way they do that is to look at the content on your site and then rank order sites based on that content. So ultimately, just as if you were dealing with a salesperson, you would want them to know every nook and cranny of the product mix. They're expecting the same thing from your website. And without that being there, your competitor becomes the backbone. So how do you go about developing a web strategy? Okay? There's really 3 pillars to this. And while it may seem fairly straightforward, each of these could easily take up a webinar schedule for much more time than today's. The first is drive, if you will, driving folks to your website. If you think about it, how do I get people to walk in the door of my store, if you will? Okay? Get traffic to that site. However, if they get there, they can't find what they're looking for. It's difficult to navigate. They can't find their way around. It's undifferentiated. There's not a good call to action. There's not a good, a compelling presentation. You're never going to get the most important piece, which is the conversion. How do you get that window shopper to actually reach out and contact you, whether it be by email, whether they pick up the phone, whether they send you an RFQ, RFP, RFI, regardless of what it may be? How do you convert that individual who's a prospect or a suspect into a prospect and ideally eventually into a customer? And then finally, and regrettably the piece that tends to be overlooked a little bit too much, is the measurement itself. Okay? The web provides the ability to give deep and very detailed information about what's going on your site. Which search terms that are folks using that are very, very sticky. When they search for this on my site, they tend to stay on my site and look at multiple pages. However, when they search for this other product, they tend to bounce right off the site. What that tells you immediately is where they're bouncing, where they're not staying on the site. The presentation of that information isn't compelling enough to keep them there. Conversely, where they are staying, where they are going deeper into the site, that's clearly delivering the type of content they want. The other thing that measurement, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, is it can give you insight into emerging markets. It can give you insight into cyclicality that may exist in business. For instance, if you're doing HVAC and you hope to sell into the southern hemisphere, well, their winter is our summer and vice versa. So when you think about marketing campaigns and when people are searching and what those buying cycles are, you have to adjust to those local conditions. So what you present for a U.S. or a northern hemisphere customer may be significantly different if you go into the southern hemisphere. Okay, so driving qualified buyers to your site. Obviously, as this page indicates, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Specialized search engines like Thomasnet, Thomasnet News, the general search engines as indicated in the top left, social media increasingly becoming a way people communicate, okay, and people source, and trade shows and some of the, ads, brochures, and so forth, and some of the more traditional means. A good marketing mix would look to some, if not all, of these sorts of things to ensure that you reach the same market. One thing to absolutely be aware of is in different parts of the world, internet connectivity is not quite as robust as it can be here in the United States. Again, depending on where you're going, things like streaming video and things of that nature may be more or less applicable because they simply may not have the bandwidth and the infrastructure to do it. So again, this is where commercial services can truly help you in understanding what those local conditions are. Now, the big piece, the $64,000 question, if you will, is how do I get those folks who come to my site to actually reach out and give me the potential to do business with them? And if you think about it again, very, very similar in the online world and the offline world. So if you think about it, and I'll use a retail analogy here that we're all probably pretty familiar with. You walk into a store, you're looking to buy something, what's the first thing you do? You verify, am I in the right place? Okay? Somebody comes to your website, research shows that you have about 3 to 5 seconds to actually get that person to understand what you do and think that they're in the right place. Now, one of the important messages from that is you have a very text-heavy homepage. The likelihood that they're going to read through all of that is pretty low. So you've got to be able to very quickly, visually, present that information so that they know they're in the right place. Now, the next thing they want to do is, okay, I'm in the right place, but do you have what I'm looking for? This is where how they navigate your site, okay, and the ability to find what they want becomes absolutely crucial. So in a retail environment, there's signs hanging over aisles, a lot of different ways to do that. In the web world, they might do it a lot of different ways. They may search by application, okay? I need something for mining. They may search by a part number. They may search by a product name. They may search by a service. The important aspect of it is, and this is absolutely crucial to remember, is the searcher dictates how they will look for the information. One size fits all, in this case, will absolutely not work. It will meet some people's needs, but not others. Some people are visual, some are textual. There's different ways to present information. You need to be aware of that, so when you design your site, when you work with whomever it may be to design that site and develop that content, that you address the various ways someone may search for your information. Because again, if they're looking for it at an application level and they don't see that, the verification piece goes out the window because they are not going to search around your site to see if you have it. They're just going to hit that back button. So once they search around a little bit, they find what they're looking for. The next step is evaluate. So to beat this retail metaphor to death, so I go in and there's 10 brands of toothpaste. Which one do I use? Which one do I like? You want the ability to evaluate, a side-by-side evaluation. Can it do this? Can it do this? Can it do this? This is where deep content and the attributes associated with your product are absolutely crucial. Not only that they are there, but they are there in an easily digestible, almost intuitive manner, understanding that there can be some language barriers here. So you want to really, the ability to drive to physical attributes, size, measurements, horsepowers, whatever the applicable specs within your industry are absolutely crucial because that language is universal. Okay? And finally, and this is the piece where it breaks down in the retail world because you can never find anybody to help you, the final piece is how do you take action? Okay? And that could be a variety of things. Maybe I do an email. Okay? Maybe I send you an RFQ, RFI, RFP. Maybe I pick up the phone and call you, which of course we all would think would be ideal. But the reality of it is, again, different users are going to interact different ways. As we all know, if part of the market you're trying to reach are design engineers, the likelihood that they're going to pick up the phone and call at an initial stage of this is pretty low. So you have to allow them to communicate electronically. So again, it's to verify, search, evaluate, take action is absolutely crucial. We call that VSET. Now, it's not quite as elegant of a acronym perhaps as USIAC, but probably still pretty good. But remember that. It's the ability to do those four things ultimately dictate whether somebody will go deeper and potentially reach out and contact you. Now, the next piece, and again, especially in such a data-driven environment such as manufacturing, we think about Six Sigma, we think about quality circles, and the focus on looking at, digesting data, and improving processes. It simply astounds me sometimes how little this aspect of the three pillars is really looked at. Okay, some of the things this tells you at a very fundamental level is what's working and what's not. Am I getting traffic for this part of my product set? If not, why? Am I getting the right sort of people coming in for it? Are people staying on my site, or are people leaving? What trends do I see emerging in the market? Okay, what markets do I see emerging? With the rapid development of a lot of parts of what's been known as the second and the third world, understanding where new buying activity may come in is absolutely crucial. Perhaps a market you want to go into just has had significant improvements in their electrical grid. That may open up opportunities that simply didn't exist a few years ago. So when you look at search traffic, not only what they're searching for, but where they're searching for, it's absolutely crucial. This is the sort of intelligence that not only can commercial services help you with, but also when you look into that crystal ball of what is the market going to hold, this is the sort of intelligence that folks pay tens of thousands and more to market research firms for. So, all that being said, why don't we see what that might look like online? So, I know on the call today we have folks selling both products, so we say electronic components, as well as folks selling services, say, plastic injection molding or something like that. So I'm going to do two searches here, okay, to really show you what this may look like to the real world, okay? So for the first, we'll do, I said it earlier, so we'll do deep groove ball bearings, radial ball bearings, okay? And so someone will go to Google or Baidu or whatever the case may be, and I apologize, I'm not the typist. And right here, the first one, we see deep groove ball bearings underneath it at Emerson Bearings. So they're going to be presented with a list of results. They're going to click onto one of those results, okay? And as we scroll down this page a little bit, what you see here is the information about a variety of these particular products. Now, in this case, it's coded by their product serial numbers, the 6000, 6200, 6300, and the like. Okay, but what you see here, you see information about the what it does. Also, you see on the left of the screen that there's a variety of different products listed here. Okay, so again, for those who are textual, this is great. For those who are visual, it's great. Now, I will admit, I don't quite know what I'm looking at, but those who are looking to buy your product certainly do. So, say I'm looking for this 6000 series. And as you see here, look at the depth of detail that you see here, potentially for somebody looking for your products. You know, bore diameters, OD, width, etc. Amazing. I mean, anybody come here, they know they're in exactly the right place. But maybe I'm not quite sure which the right one for me is. So then what I want to do is the evaluate part of the process. Okay, so I'll just click these first three. Compare here. And what it will do is take that same information and present it in a format very digestible for the buyer. Somebody who's looking for a radial ball bearing knows that they're in the right place. They know that this company can accommodate their needs. So what's next? Hey, and here's the most important part. I want to get a hold of them. So I decide I want the 6000 series. I click that. I request a quote. And it now brings me to a screen allowing me to do that, asking quantities, getting prices, and so forth. So if you think about what I talked about before, immediately you do a search, you immediately come to the site, you know you're in the right place, you've verified. You have the ability to search and find exactly what you want. You then have the ability to evaluate side by side without clicking between screens and printing things up and having to lay things across the table or your desk so to see what's there. And then you have the ability to take action. Very, very quick, and all that took, even with my talking, it took about a minute. And that's the other thing to remember. When you think about time on site and what people are expecting, in the web world, 2 to 3 minutes on a site is a lifetime. Okay? As you saw, what you saw right here, very, very quick. Your opportunity to capture that prospect's interest and get them to speak with you is very short. So therefore, the information has to be exactly what they want in a format that they like that allows them to do what we've talked about today. So this was a search for a product. But let's say you're in, let's say you sell a service company. Now that's a different dynamic. In a product world like this, I can send in, hey, here's what I want. I know it's exactly what I want. Give me back a price. Conversely, in the service world, the conversation really begins with what I'm trying to do is, and this is where your expertise becomes your differentiator and the value you can deliver to these customers. But the process itself is very, very similar. So say I'm looking for, oh, I don't know, custom wire forms. Okay? What I'll see here is I'm looking for custom wire forms. And didn't quite work the way we figured. Oh, I see. Like I said, I'm not a good typist. I apologize. So we look for custom wire forms. I'm like, that's what not supposed to be there. Okay. And in this case, again, I find a list of search engine results. Okay. This brings to a company out of Chicago called Keats Manufacturing. And again, what you have here is information specifically on what they did. Now, in this company's case, they actually have what's called portfolios in there. These are some examples of what we do and how we do it. Okay? And again, very prominently displayed, request a quote, of course, or one could go ahead and call through. But the key to all of this is in each of these instances, somebody has gone online looking for a specific product or looking for a type of service without a clue of whom they're going to contact. But the ability to provide the information to be found, so you drive the traffic to the information to the website, to provide information that then converts it from, gee, I came here and I left, to instead I reach out and contact the customer, ultimately is what's going to drive dollars to your bottom line. So with that, let's talk a little bit about a couple examples of folks who really did enhance their bottom line. The first company I'd like to talk about is a company called Aero Industries. Okay, excuse me as we change over screen real quickly. Arrow is a manufacturer down in Central Florida, specialized metal distributor, primarily specialty metals. The president of the company, run by Nancy Simmons, bought the company in 2004. They were doing well, but however, there were clouds on the horizon. Okay? Primarily, 85% of their business came from the U.S. Department of Defense, and specifically NASA. Okay? For those familiar with that part of the world, large aerospace presence due to the space program that's been down there since the 60s. However, with the coming discontinuance of the shuttle program, Nancy realized that unless she could bring in new customers, things were not looking very bright for her business. So in looking at that, we were able to work with her and determine what's the next steps for what I need to do. So how do we bring in not only more customers, but then get those customers, the prospects, to get those customers to convert into prospects. So in working with Ms. Simmons, initially we worked with, on our site called thomasnet.com in order to actually drive traffic. So these are folks, and just like we saw in the search engine, same process. They go there, they search for a specific product or service, and they find companies that can provide that service. So what we found is we were driving a significant amount of traffic to the site, but Nancy's concern was, I see all these folks coming in, but I don't see really the percentage of people contacting me that I would like. So being a very astute business person, she said, you know, we need to enhance our site, and what you see here is a representation of their homepage. Okay? Excuse me. And to say that the results from this, from deploying our Navigator platform, which is our proprietary technology for these online catalogs and search functionality, has had a significant boom to her bottom line. Okay, to put a number to that. Okay, in less than a year, she saw a 20% bump to net income. Think about that, a 20% lift to the bottom line. I can think of few businesses, in fact, I can't think of any businesses that wouldn't jump at that opportunity. More importantly, perhaps, is she was able to reduce her reliance on a single vertical market, that is defense spending. Able to open up, it went from virtually a majority down to about 2/3 of her business. Still a little heavily weighted in that direction, but again, we're only talking about a change that's occurred over the course of the year. So if you think about that, one of the key elements, as we all know, okay, in maintaining a good business performance in the ups and downs of the macroeconomic cycle is having a diversified business base. For a lot of the last 5 years, I've worked within the Midwest, heavily dependent on auto manufacturing, as we all know, and obviously, as we know, the last few years wasn't so great. The impact on the companies that were solely reliant on automotive was significant. Those who, like Nancy, had seen the changes coming, had seen the need to diversify, weathered that storm significantly better, okay, to the point that many are thriving today while many of their past competitors are exactly that in the past, okay? Some of the things, you know, beyond this bottom line, you know, a $200,000 order from Finmeccanica, which is one of the largest aircraft manufacturers in Europe. It's based in Italy. You know, a series of new business opportunities selling metals to countries and companies that have purchased surplus U.S. military equipment. So think about that. They sold it when they built it, and they sold it when they refurbished it. Now, the important thing, all kidding aside, is if you're in any way, shape, or form in the parts business, okay, in the aftermarket business, significant opportunities here. There is a huge gray market for used U.S. equipment in other parts of the world. So if you're servicing that here, it is a natural adjacency for you to go offshore with that, okay? And, you know, it has reached such a point that she is actually in the process now of adding an office overseas. I mean, it has gone from being something she wanted to do to being a major thrust of her business. And as this next slide shows, you know, we help them to evolve into a new organization, diversified global customer base, more growth potential than ever before. Without the proper internet presence, this simply would not have been possible for a company of this scale. Her ability to put people overseas and do those sorts of things simply was not there. Now, I'd like to also ask Cindy to speak a little bit here about how commercial services worked with Arrow, because they significantly helped, once they developed these opportunities, understanding how to really bring them to fruition. So, Cindy?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, as Joe said, not only has Nancy been working with Thomasnet, but she's been a client of our Orlando U.S. Export Assistance Center, the USEAC, for 5 years. And she really represents, as Joe said, a perfect example of how a company can combine the information provided by WebTrax with the services and products that we provide in the commercial service. So, for example, if your WebTrax reports indicates that your website's getting a lot of traffic from a certain country, the commercial service can provide you with free market intelligence on that market. We can look at upcoming trade opportunities, whether that means delegations coming into a trade show here, or perhaps a high-level trade mission that's being led into that market that you could become part of. We can get you information about possible free trade agreements that are in existence, or export controls that would just help you determine if it's a good fit for your product or your service. So, and let's say that the data indicates that a certain foreign company is repeatedly visiting your website. We can incorporate that information into our Gold Key matchmaking service as a potential representative for your firm when you're ready to seek an agent, a distributor, or a joint venture partner in that foreign market. We can also conduct due diligence on the bona fides of a prospective partner, as well as check on their credit rating to see if perhaps one of those foreign visitors who keeps visiting your website would qualify for an export-import bank loan guarantee. As I mentioned on the onset, we were first introduced to ThomasNet through one of our industrial clients, Tony Baer, who's the owner and president of TechPack. TechPack offers thermal-forming solutions for the electronics, healthcare, and consumer markets. His company also serves as a perfect example of how technology has allowed a small manufacturer to totally revamp their business model. And as you can see from this quote, TechPack now relies on their ThomasNet website and our Gold Key matchmaking services with stellar results. And as Tony says, it's simple focus. Joe?
Great. Thank you, Cindy. So, what does this all mean? And more importantly, what does it all mean if I want to export, right? I mean, this is great, but, how is this different than what I might do in the States? And to some extent, it isn't. And that's the key element. As, if we all remember the WWW, the first piece of it is world, okay? Really, when you bring all of this together, in order to reach foreign markets, one has to have the ability, the same as they would have here in the States, of presenting information in a compelling fashion to potential buyers there. Unless one has the breadth and the depth to establish foreign offices or distribution channels overseas, the only way to do that for a small to mid-sized business is via the Internet. And as many very large companies are discovering as well, it's also the only way to do it for them. Why? Because it's economical. It allows you to change on the fly. Establishing a physical overseas presence can entail a significant investment, and gosh, everybody hopes that they're right, versus developing a site targeted at specific, or microsites, targeted at specific foreign markets, enable you to reach those foreign markets much, much more economically and much, much more effectively. Okay? And then working obviously with commercial services to tie it all together to navigate what's necessary to be done once you're on the site there. So, in summing it all up, we feel we offer a great solution in helping companies do this. Are there other companies out there who do it? Absolutely. Do I like to think we're better? Absolutely, but that may be a little bit more subjective than objective, and I'll be honest enough to say that. But I think the important point with all of this is to look at the right vendor, the right partners to help you reach those foreign markets. And in order to do that, they need expertise in a few areas. Okay? You need expertise on the regulatory, the matchmaking, and so forth, and clearly commercial services is better positioned, candidly, than anyone to do that. Okay? Secondly, you need folks who truly understand the Internet and what to do there. And then you need folks who understand the industrial buying process, because it is different, not only from other B2B, certainly from B2C, but how is it done in the industrial world? As an example, just a very basic one. Most industrial purchases are buyer-driven. If I'm selling industrial ovens and You don't need one. It doesn't really matter how good of a salesperson or how good of a product I have. You don't need one. However, when that customer, potential customer, is in the market for that product, it is absolutely critical that you get that opportunity to put your best foot forward, because there may not be another opportunity for years or decades. So with that, we'd like to open it up to questions. Many folks have sent some in, and I believe we have some teed up here already.
Yes. In fact, we have our first question in, which is, I am interested in exporting my custom pumps to India. What can I do on my website to help, Joe?
Okay. Well, in many ways, a lot of what we talked about here today. Present the proper content, easily navigable manner, okay, that will enable folks to both find your site, but more importantly, once they get to your site, understand exactly what it is. Now, if you're on the custom side, more often than not, it's products aligned with a particular application. So if that's the thrust of what you're doing, that first presentation would probably want to be a little bit more application, agriculture, water filtration, water purification, in a country like India, than maybe just product-driven itself. As your degree of custom increases, it becomes more application-driven, so that's really what you want to highlight on that home page and in your search options, as opposed to the products themselves. Because in the custom world, somebody's looking for a solution, so you want to tie that back to what the expertise you bring to the table.
Right. All right, our next question. We manufacture here and sell product around the world through distribution channels. Is it possible to use our website to locate reputable distributors in the Middle East?
Well, a website is more of a destination than an outreach per se. So in looking at reaching good partners like that, certainly, there's a give and a take there. There are probably distributors who are looking for manufacturers whose products to represent, okay? But I think this is one I'd really like to turn over to Cindy, because I think talking specifically about how to broach those foreign markets is something that certainly she's much more expert at than I. So Cindy?
Sure, thanks, Joe. What you could actually do is turn the information that you receive about hits to your website to your advantage. If, for example, if you remember we talked about the WebTrax product. If you see that one particular company is continually going onto your website and spending time there, that's one of the companies that we could incorporate into what we call our Gold Key service. And with that, you would, first of all, go to export.gov, locate your closest U.S. Export Assistance Center, and contact the trade specialist that covers your particular industry. You'll meet face-to-face with that trade specialist, and they'll begin the customized solution process. If you're interested specifically in the Middle East, that trade specialist will drill that down and look at which countries within the Middle East would make the best fit for you, which of the offices, which of the regions he or she will begin working with. They'll provide you with free market intelligence. They'll provide you with perhaps delegations that are coming to one of the trade shows that we certify here in the United States. So you could go to the trade show wherever you're located and meet with companies that are now working in that market in the relevant industry. If you have the resources to travel to the region of the world that you're interested in, then we would set up the Gold Key matchmaking service, and that's where you fill out a 2-page sheet, and it's a description of your perfect joint venture partner, agent, or distributor. We send that information to the trade specialist. Let's say you're interested in entering into Qatar. We would send that to the trade specialist at the U.S. Embassy in Doha. The trade specialist would take a look at it and say, absolutely, this is a perfect market for your product. You would set up a time frame when you would travel to that country, and the trade specialist casts a really wide net, looking at all the companies in their database that fit your description of the joint venture partner, agent, or distributor. You send down product literature, because we know that in many countries you still have to have something to hold on to. They can't just go to your website. And then they start whittling that wide net down to about 4 or 5 of the best prospects for your to potentially represent you in the market. You fly to that country. Quite often we try to piggyback that off a relevant trade show, And then the trade specialist will either accompany you or make arrangements for someone to accompany you out to each one of those sites, of those companies that had indicated that they're interested in becoming your partner, and they're there to help translate and understand the cultural idiosyncrasies as well. That was a product that I told you that comes with a money-back guarantee and starts as low as $700.
Wow, that's pretty incredible, Cindy. You sure you don't leave a zero off of that?
Okay, our next question is, no one buys my products directly online. I go to engineers. How can I get engineers overseas to see my CAD drawings without having my design stolen? And then the second part of it is, and what about language barriers? I do a lot of business in China.
Okay. That's a great question. I mean, design engineers are truly the gold standard in industrial sales. And why it comes as no surprise that they may not actually be buying products online. They are typically speccing the products that they find online. So the first piece of it is, of course, how do I protect my intellectual property, especially going to certain markets around the world where respect for intellectual property rights is perhaps not what it is in here in the States and in other parts of the world. The way to address that is twofold. If they are existing customers, creating a secure part of your website is the ideal way. I mean, you give them a login, you give them a password. However, that's not very practicable for new prospects. So therefore, what you really want to supply are envelope drawings. Now, to give you an idea of what I mean by that, and I'm sure the gentleman or lady who asked the question understand, but for those who may not, think about a letter, okay? Inside the letter is all the content. Inside the envelope is all the content. It's what I'm saying. It's everything I want to share. An envelope drawing is essentially the outer shell. It gives dimensions, it gives interfaces, it gives sockets, things of that nature, but it doesn't actually give the details of what sits within it. So in other words, it's like looking at the letter. You know the size, you know the shape, you know it fits. However, you have no clue whatsoever about what's inside it. So the easiest way to do that is to provide those envelope drawings in a mechanism that allows it to interface directly in a easy for me to say, in a drop and drag manner, regardless of what CAD system is used. And this is one of the key elements to understand, is no CAD vendor, at least from the most recent research I've seen, owns more than about 17% of the market. So maybe you're a big AutoCAD shop, well, that's good for less than 1 in 5 of the market, okay? So you really want to look at a service that will allow you to take those drawings, those envelope drawings, thereby protecting your intellectual property, okay, and drag and drop them in regardless of the CAD system that the customer or prospect may be using. This is especially relevant if you're going overseas, because the last thing you want is your help and your support desk and your very valuable and high-priced engineers trying to overcome some of those language barriers, addressing how I inject this into and insert it into a drawing in some other system. Okay, so you want something that it speaks a universal language, if you will. Now, speaking of that, let's segue into the language problem questions themselves. Obviously, that's significant. Okay, so while English to some extent is the universal language of business, the applicability and the depth to which it can be used obviously varies both by country and by individual. Okay, so this is really where technical attributes, dimensional attributes, becomes absolutely crucial, because a millimeter is a millimeter is a millimeter, regardless of where you go around the world. Now, one thing I will also mention here, okay, is be certain that if it is a country that uses metric, obviously, that you can supply your products in metric versus imperial, and that the dimensions are presented accordingly, okay? And while most of the world uses metric, there are other areas, particularly those areas that were part of the British Empire at one point or another, where the imperial system still prevails. So in looking at going overseas, and again, this is where commercial services can truly benefit and help you, because they know the intricacies of, one, how big of a language barrier will exist within a particular country. Two, just the cultural things such as, metric versus imperial and things like that. And three, how much of an obstacle can be. Cindy, you may want to chime in a little bit on how companies can navigate through some of those language barriers.
Sure, thanks, Joe. One of the places that we always recommend companies start with to better understand a specific market if they're deciding whether to enter that country or not, and to look for specific sales channels, would be to go to the Country Commercial Guide, and you can also access that along with all of our free market research on the 80 countries where we're physically located on our portal on www.export.gov. So you'll want to go into the commercial library and download the Country Commercial Guide. And the Country Commercial Guide is a comprehensive document that the Commercial Service, the U.S. Department of Commerce there, takes the lead on, but we receive contributions from the economic section of the U.S. Embassy as well. But basically, everything you need to know about that country, including the most appropriate sales channels, potential trade barriers, potential free trade agreements, the best prospects, and it's searchable. That's just a fantastic source of intelligence on any market that you may be considering. And then you can drill down and look for industry-specific reports, which are also there on export.gov.
All right, and we have another question that says, hi, I think this one may be for Cindy. What are the top countries you recommend exporting to in 2012?
We hear a lot about the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, but we're also very focused on markets like Vietnam, India, I already said that, but Indonesia, Taiwan, and Thailand. And again, you can go to export.gov and look at the Country Commercial Guide and see what opportunities are there. In the Country Commercial Guide, they also give websites for pertinent host country sites. They talk about trade shows that you might be interested in piggybacking your gold key around. And they also talk about cultural differences. So that's really where our local trade specialists overseas, and in any given market, within a U.S. embassy or consulate, a third of the people who are working there are actually part of the U.S. mission. So they are Americans who are working in that country, in the host country, but two-thirds of them are locally engaged staff, and they're the ones who speak both languages, often many languages. They understand the cultural idiosyncrasies of that market. They help us interpret what it means, for example, when we go into a meeting and perhaps the potential partner or customer doesn't meet us in the eye, doesn't look at us in the eye, and we're thinking that there's something, we're feeling uncomfortable that they don't trust us, and the trade specialist is there to say, no, that's the utmost sign of respect. So they're there really to help walk you through the entire process so that you'll be successful and stay in that market.
Terrific. Thank you, Cindy.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. We, unfortunately, we only have a couple minutes left, and I know there are still some questions there. So what I would like to ask, if everybody's okay with it, since we're running out of time, is on the screen in front of you, see both my email as up there, as well as how to reach the U.S. Export Assistance Center, to the USIAC. Certainly, if the question was on the technology or the market penetration sides, please either email me directly or reach out to the your local USIAC, as Cindy suggested, and that's simply a matter of going to the site and entering your zip code. What I'd also like to do is a way of thanks to everyone who was on the call today, because we do appreciate your time. We know you're busy. I'd like to also extend an offer that should any of the manufacturers, distributors, and so forth, because I know we have other folks on the call as well, be open to it. We would be more than happy on our expense to perform an analysis of your site, to specifically identify, to put some tracking code on it, identify what is and isn't working, give you some recommendations off of that, some which may be germane to us, some which may not, okay? So it's really not a matter of using some sort of subterfuge to get a sales opportunity, quite the opposite. We see this as a tremendous opportunity to help you develop your site, to help drive American exports, which obviously is good for the country, helps unemployment, and it's just as beneficial in so many ways, more ways than we can discuss today. So I'd like, should you be so interested, you will see my email up there on the screen. As Cindy mentioned, This presentation, as well as the recording, will be in their library. It will also be on our site, www.thomasnet.com. Again, I thank everybody for their time today. We hope it was beneficial, and we appreciate your participation. Cindy?
Thanks. As Jill mentioned, if you're interested in learning for free the basics of exporting, just go to our portal, export.gov, and you'll find similar webinars like the one you just participated in. And I thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for participating in today's conference. You may disconnect at this time.
You're down to